Captain Lee Dong-woo stood on the bridge of his warship, looking at the enemy fleet outside Earth. The alien ships were huge and black, like giant metal monsters floating in space. They had arrived 3 days ago, and everyone on Earth was scared. The aliens called themselves the Vorthak Empire, and they were the most feared creatures in the galaxy. The Vorthak ships surrounded all of Earth's space stations, their weapons pointed at human cities and colonies. They had come with demands that made the whole galaxy shake with fear. These reptile-like aliens with sharp teeth and cold eyes wanted humans to give up half of all their worlds. They also wanted humans to pay them with rare metals and crystals every year, or they would destroy everything. Lee Dong-woo watched the alien fleet through his ship's windows. His crew was quiet but ready for anything. Lieutenant Kim Jae-sung sat at the weapons controls. His hands were steady even though sweat dropped from his face. Chief Engineer Choi Mi-young checked all the ship systems, making sure everything worked perfectly. Communications Officer Han Woo-jin waited for orders from his captain. The captain knew what the Vorthak could do. They were famous across the galaxy for destroying civilizations that said no to them. The peaceful blue-skinned Altarians had given up their beautiful home planet without a fight. The mighty crystal beings called the Crystalline Collective had handed over their most precious energy sources. Even the proud warrior race known as the Mandorians had chosen to talk instead of fight when the Vorthak came to their worlds. Every species in the galaxy feared the Vorthak because they always won. They never lost a war. They never failed to get what they wanted. When they came to a world with their demands, the people always surrendered. It was easier to give them what they wanted than to see everything burn. But humans were different, and the galaxy was about to learn why. The communication screen on the bridge lit up with the face of Overlord Thresh, the Vorthak leader. His reptile face was covered in scales and his yellow eyes glowed like fire. His voice sounded like metal scraping against stone when he spoke. His words came through the speakers and filled the bridge with their cold threat. "Listen well, primitive humans," he said. "You have 12 hours to accept our demands. Your weak species cannot understand the power we bring to your pathetic worlds. We have conquered 1,000 planets across the galaxy. We have broken empires that ruled for millions of years. You will surrender everything we ask for, or we will turn your worlds into burning rocks floating in space." Lee Dong-woo looked at his crew and saw something in their eyes that the galaxy had never seen before when facing the Vorthak. It was not fear or panic. It was anger mixed with determination. His people were ready to fight even if it meant death. The captain opened a communication channel that would reach every human ship in the solar system and every colony across human space. His voice was calm but strong like steel. His words would travel faster than light to every corner of human territory, and then spread across the galaxy, making aliens everywhere. "Stop and listen. This is Captain Lee Dong-woo of the United Earth Forces ship Indomitable," he said. "We have received the Vorthak ultimatum and listened to their threats. Our response is simple and clear. Humanity does not negotiate with terrorists. We do not surrender to bullies who threaten innocent people. We do not bow down to aliens who think fear makes them strong. If the Vorthak Empire wants a fight, they will get one. They will remember forever, across human space." Similar messages rang out from every commander, and Captain Admiral Yang Se-ra, who commanded the Mars Defense Fleet, sent the same message. Colonel Im Tae-ho, who protected the mining stations around Europa, gave the same answer. Captain Song Hye-jin, who defended the research facilities near Jupiter, said the same words: humanity would not yield to terrorist demands. The response was the same everywhere humans lived, from the farming colonies in the outer systems to the big cities on Earth itself, from the mining asteroids to the space stations orbiting distant suns. Every human settlement gave the same answer to the Vorthak threats. They would not surrender. They would not pay tribute. They would not bow to fear on alien worlds across the galaxy. News of humanity's refusal spread like wildfire. Diplomatic channels buzzed with shocked voices. Alien leaders called emergency meetings. Species that had ruled space for thousands of years could not believe what they were hearing. A young, primitive species was saying no to The Vorthak Empire. The betting pools on alien worlds gave humans zero chance of survival. Galactic news networks called it the greatest act of stupidity in galactic history. Military experts said humans would be extinct within days. Some aliens called humans brave, but most called them insane. The Galactic Council chambers filled with representatives from hundreds of different species. All of them were asking the same question. Had humans finally lost their minds? The Altarian ambassador, who had surrendered his own homeworld without a fight, spoke with worry in his crystal voice. "These humans do not understand what they face," he said. "The Vorthak have weapons that can crack planets in half. Their fleet contains more ships than most species have ever seen. They have never been defeated in battle. Why do the humans choose certain death over reasonable surrender?" But humans had something the galaxy had forgotten. They had learned lessons from their own history about dealing with bullies and terrorists. They knew that giving in to threats only led to more threats. They understood that freedom was worth fighting for, even when the fight seemed impossible to win. On Earth, families hugged each other goodbye as fathers and mothers prepared for war. Children who were too young to fight helped in factories and communication centers, making weapons and supplies. Retired soldiers came back to serve their world one more time. Civilian pilots volunteered to fly military ships. The galaxy watched in amazement and horror as an entire species chose war over surrender. No one had ever seen anything like it before. A whole civilization deciding that death was better than slavery, that fighting was better than giving up. Captain Oh Shung-min commanding a small patrol ship near the asteroid belt sent a message that would become famous across the galaxy. "They think we are crazy for refusing to give up," he said. "Maybe we are crazy, but we would rather be crazy and free than smart and slaves." The 12-hour deadline was almost over. The Vorthak fleet moved into attack positions. Their massive ships powered up weapons that could destroy cities. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if humans would change their minds at the last moment. But no, surrender came instead. More human ships appeared from behind planets and moons, small fighters and big battleships all flying toward the alien fleet. Cargo ships had been turned into weapons. Passenger ships carried soldiers. Mining vessels brought their industrial tools modified for war. The galaxy was about to witness something it had never seen before. A species that refused to negotiate with terrorists was about to show what that meant in practice. The Vorthak had expected easy victory and quick surrender. What they got instead was humanity united in defiance. The stage was set for a war that would change the galaxy forever. News of humanity's defiance spread across the galaxy faster than the fastest starships could travel. On every alien world, from the crystal cities of New Centauri to the floating gardens of Zephyria, the same conversations were happening. Aliens everywhere were asking each other the same question. Had the humans finally gone completely insane? The Galactic Council building on the capital world of Nexus Prime buzzed with activity like a disturbed insect nest. Representatives from hundreds of different species rushed through the marble corridors, their voices echoing in dozens of alien languages. Emergency sessions were called. Special meetings were arranged. The entire galactic government had stopped its normal work to focus on one small species that had done the impossible. In the great chamber where the most powerful beings in the galaxy made decisions that affected trillions of lives, Ambassador Yu Danbi stood alone, facing creatures that had ruled space when humans were still living in caves on Earth. The chamber was so quiet you could hear the soft humming of the translation devices. The Altarian delegate spoke first. His people looked like tall, thin humans made of living crystal, and his voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Ambassador Yu," he said, "the Vorthak Empire has never been defeated in battle. They possess weapons that can crack entire planets like eggs. Their fleet contains thousands of warships, each one capable of destroying a city. Why does humanity choose extinction over negotiation?" Yu Danbi smiled, and her expression had become famous throughout human space. It was a smile that said, humans knew something the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. "Honored Altarian," she replied, "you assume that survival requires giving up everything you believe in. Humans have learned a different lesson from our history. We believe that some things are worth fighting for even when the fight seems impossible to win. The massive Thurian representative, whose species looked like living rocks covered in moss, rumbled his deep voice through the chamber. Young human, your species has existed for barely a moment compared to civilizations represented here. We have seen the Vorthak destroy empires that lasted millions of years. Why do you think you can succeed where ancient powers have failed? Because we have something those ancient powers lost. Udanbi answered. We remember what it means to be free. We know that bullies only understand one language, and that language is strength. When someone threatens everything you love, you can either fight back or spend the rest of your life being afraid. The chamber filled with whispers and strange alien sounds as representatives talked among themselves. In their native languages, some species communicated through color changes. Others used telepathy. Many had never heard such words spoken in the Galactic Council before. Meanwhile, in human space, the preparation for war continued at a pace that amazed. Even the humans themselves. Captain Ryu Minho coordinated the defense of the asteroid belt mining operations, turning civilian equipment into military weapons. Commander Li Yu-jin organized evacuation procedures for families and children, but even as transport ships carried loved ones to safety, not a single human colony requested to negotiate with the Vorthak on Mars. Admiral Yang Seira walked through the shipyards where workers labored day and night, building new fighters and repairing old warships. The Red Planet had become a giant weapons factory as every available resource was turned toward the war effort. Retired engineers came back to work. Grandmothers who had served in previous conflicts returned to help design better armor. Students skipped school to help in ammunition factories. The alien media could not understand what they were seeing. Galactic News Network ran stories with headlines like, Human Death Wish Puzzles Galaxy and Primitive Species Chooses Suicide Over. Wisdom expert analysts from species that had studied warfare for thousands of years appeared on news programs explaining why human resistance was doomed to fail. But something strange was happening on alien worlds as the news spread. Some aliens began to remember their own histories before the Vorthak came. Young Altarians asked their elders why their beautiful homeworld had been given up without even trying to fight. Crystalline collective members wondered aloud if their precious energy cores could have been defended instead of handed over on the warrior world of Mandaria, where combat was considered the highest art form. Old soldiers gathered in taverns talking quietly about the humans. They had been so proud of their fighting skills until the Vorthak came with overwhelming numbers. Then they had chosen to negotiate rather than face extinction. Now they watched humans make the choice they had been too afraid to make. Captain Oh Sung-min, commanding his small patrol frigate near Jupiter, sent regular reports back to Earth Command. His ship was old and his crew was small, but their spirits were high. They had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment, patrolling the outer system where Vorthak scouts were expected. To appear first in one of his transmissions that would later become legendary across human space, he said, They think we are crazy for refusing to surrender. Maybe we are, but our ancestors taught us something important about bullies. If you give them what they want today, they will come back tomorrow asking for more. The only way to stop a bully is to make them understand that threatening you has consequences. The message was intercepted by alien listening posts and broadcast across galactic networks. Within hours, it was being translated into hundreds of languages and discussed on thousands of worlds. For the first time in generations, species across the galaxy were having conversations they had not had since before the Vorthak became a threat on Earth itself. The preparations took on an almost festival atmosphere. Humans had always been good at coming together during crisis, and this was the biggest crisis their species had ever faced. But instead of panic, there was determination. Instead of fear, there was anger at beings who thought they could threaten humanity and expect easy surrender. Children too young to serve in the military helped by carrying messages and supplies. Elderly people who remembered the last great wars shared their knowledge with younger soldiers. Civilian pilots trained on military equipment. Cargo ship captains learned how to fly their vessels as weapons. The transformation of human society amazed alien observers who had infiltrated human space. Years earlier, as traders and diplomats, they reported back to their governments about a species that was completely changing itself for war, but doing it with a unity and purpose that seemed impossible. Commander Nam Hyejin at Luna Base sent her Own message to the galaxy. Her words were broadcast on every human frequency and picked up by alien receivers throughout the solar system. We know the odds, she said. We know what the Vorthak have done to other species. We know we might lose, but we also know something else. We know that living on your knees is not really living at all. The 12-hour deadline given by the Vorthak was approaching its end. Across human space, final preparations were being made. Weapons were loaded. Ships took their positions. Families said goodbye to each other, not knowing if they would meet again. The galaxy watched and waited to see if humans would break at the last moment and beg for negotiation. But no surrender came. No request for talks arrived. Instead, human ships moved to intercept the Vorthak fleet, combat ready and determined to fight. Every species in the galaxy realized they were about to witness something that had not happened for generations. Someone was about to fight the Vorthak Empire. Instead of surrendering to them, the galaxy held its breath as two civilizations prepared for a war that would change everything. After 2 weeks of brutal fighting across human space, Overlord Thresh stood in his command center staring at casualty reports that made his reptilian blood run cold. The conquest that should have taken 3 days had stretched into the most expensive campaign in Vorthak history. Every human colony had fought to the last person. Every space station had become a deadly fortress. Every civilian ship had turned into a weapon. The numbers were horrifying to the Vorthak leadership. They had lost over 3,000 warships, including dozens of heavy cruisers and battleships that took years to build. Tens of thousands of Vorthak soldiers were dead or wounded fighting an enemy that seemed to prefer death over surrender. The humans had lost hundreds of worlds, but they had made the mighty Vorthak Empire bleed. For every victory, General Vex entered the command chamber with more bad news from the front lines. Overlord, he said, the humans are adapting their resistance faster than we can counter. They share information between colonies so each world learns from the battles before it. They coordinate attacks across multiple systems using communication networks. We cannot break. Thresh turned his yellow eyes toward the tactical display showing human space. Most of the outer colonies were now under Vorthak control, but the cost had been unthinkable. The inner worlds closer to Earth were preparing defenses that intelligence reports suggested would be even more deadly. Captain Shinbo Ram had become a legend among human forces. Her small patrol ship moved through asteroid belts and debris fields, striking at Vorthak supply convoys and disappearing before enemy reinforcements could arrive. She had developed hit-and-run tactics that other human commanders copied across the war zone, turning civilian vessels into ghost fighters that appeared from nowhere. Commander Kang Mi-suk had created something the galaxy had never seen before. A resistance communication network that connected scattered human forces across dozens of star systems. Using modified civilian transmitters and relay stations hidden in asteroid fields, she coordinated surprise attacks that hit Vorthak forces from multiple directions simultaneously. Engineer Bae Dongyuk, working in secret laboratories on Mars, had designed new weapons from industrial equipment that could penetrate Vorthak armor. His improvised missiles built from mining charges and guidance systems from cargo ships were being mass-produced and distributed to human forces throughout the war zone. The galaxy watched these developments with growing amazement. Species that had surrendered to the Vorthak without fighting were studying human tactics and asking themselves difficult questions about their own choices. The betting pools on alien worlds had stopped taking wagers on human extinction and started discussing something impossible, the possibility that the Vorthak might actually lose. But the real turning point came at the Battle of Luna Station, the last major defensive position protecting Earth itself. Admiral Lim Jae-min commanded what remained of the human fleet, knowing that if Luna fell, Earth would be defenseless. The Vorthak had brought their entire remaining armada, determined to end human resistance with one overwhelming assault. The enemy fleet was massive, over 2,000 ships, including the Deathbringer, and 5 other super dreadnoughts, each one capable of destroying a city with a single shot. The human defenders had fewer than 400 ships, most of them damaged from previous battles, and many crewed by civilians with minimal military training. The battle began at dawn Earth time when Vorthak fighters swept toward Luna Station like a cloud of metal death. Admiral Lim Jae-min gave orders that would be remembered throughout galactic history. All ships attack pattern Delta. Use the moon for gravity assists. Make them pay for every meter of space. The human fleet used tactics that amazed military observers throughout the galaxy. They hid behind the moon and used its gravity to slingshot around Vorthak formations, attacking from unexpected angles. Small fighters darted through asteroid fields, drawing enemy fire away from larger ships. Cargo vessels loaded with explosives rammed Vorthak cruisers, while broadcasting final messages to their families. Captain Noyeana commanded the battleship Defiant, the largest human warship still operational. Her ship was outnumbered 50-1, but she maneuvered through the enemy fleet like a dancer, avoiding the heaviest weapons while her guns carved holes in Vorthak armor. When her ammunition ran low, she ordered ramming speed toward the Deathbringer itself. The battle raged for 18 hours, with human ships falling one by one but taking enemy vessels with them. The debris field around Luna grew thicker as ships from both sides were destroyed. The Vorthak were winning, but paying a price that shocked their commanders, who had expected easy victory. Then something happened that changed galactic history forever. Ships began appearing from hyperspace, not human vessels, but alien fleets, from species that had been watching the war with growing interest. The first to arrive were Altarian crystal ships, their hulls gleaming like diamonds as they opened fire on Vorthak formations. Behind them came the crystalline collective energy beings, who had decided that their precious power cores were worth fighting for, after all. Their ships fired beams of pure energy that cut through Vorthak armor like paper. The proud Mandorian warrior fleet followed, bringing their combat skills back to a war they had once chosen to avoid. Admiral Lim. Jamin could hardly believe what he was seeing through his viewscreen. Alien ships that had surrendered to the Vorthak years before were now fighting alongside humans against their former conquerors. The communication channels filled with voices in dozens of languages, all saying the same thing. They had remembered what it meant to fight for freedom. Ambassador Yu Danbi had done more than represent humanity at the Galactic Council. Her words about refusing to negotiate with terrorists had reminded other species of what they had lost when they chose surrender over resistance. Young aliens across the galaxy had pressured their governments to act, and finally their leaders had listened. The Thurian rock people sent their massive fortress ships that could absorb tremendous damage while returning devastating fire. The peaceful Zephyrians contributed their fast scout vessels, perfect for hit-and-run attacks. Even species that had never fought before joined the battle, bringing whatever ships they could spare. Captain Noyeana watched the combined fleet drive back the Vorthak armada and opened a communication channel that reached every ship in the battle. "This is what happens when someone finally says no to bullies," she broadcast. "Others, remember, they can say no too. The galaxy is not as helpless as the terrorists wanted us to believe." The Deathbringer itself came under attack from 6 different species working together for the first time in galactic history. Overlord Thresh found his flagship surrounded by enemies who had learned from human example that courage could be contagious. For the first time in their long history of conquest, the Vorthak fleet retreated from a battle they should have won. The mighty Deathbringer limped away from Luna Station, with its hull cracked and its weapons damaged. The other Vorthak ships followed, leaving behind the wreckage of over 800 vessels. The galaxy had witnessed something that seemed impossible. The invincible terrorists had been defeated by a coalition of species that remembered how to fight. The human example had sparked a revolution that spread across civilized space. News of the victory at Luna Station reached every corner of the galaxy within hours. Species that had lived under Vorthak tribute for generations began to rebel. Worlds that had surrendered their freedom started fighting to get it back. The empire built on fear and intimidation began to crumble as its victims learned they outnumbered their oppressors. The war was not over, but everything had changed. The Vorthak were no longer invincible, and the galaxy knew it. The defeat at Luna Station marked the beginning of the end for the Vorthak Empire. Word of their first military loss in over 1,000 years spread through the galaxy faster than their own warships could retreat. Species that had paid tribute for generations suddenly stopped sending their wealth to Vorthak collectors. Worlds that had surrendered without fighting began building weapons and training soldiers. Captain Li Dongwu, now promoted to admiral, found himself commanding something that had never existed before in galactic history. The Galactic Liberation Fleet contained ships from over 50 different species, all united by the simple principle that humanity had reintroduced to civilized space. No negotiation with terrorists, no surrender to bullies, no tribute paid to fear. The Liberation Fleet grew larger every day as more species joined the fight against their former oppressors. Altarian crystal ships worked alongside human battleships. Mandorian warriors flew formation with crystalline collective energy beings. The peaceful Zephyrians provided support vessels, while the massive Thurians contributed their fortress ships. Admiral Li Dongwu stood on the bridge of his flagship, the newly constructed battleship Freedom, watching the combined fleet prepare for the final assault on the Vorthak homeworld. The enemy capital planet called Vorthak Prime had never been attacked in the Empire's long history of conquest. It was defended by the largest military base in the galaxy and surrounded by automated defense stations that could destroy entire fleets. But the Liberation Fleet was different from any force the Vorthak had ever faced. It contained not just ships and weapons, but something more powerful: the determination of species that had remembered what freedom meant. The fleet included former slaves who knew Vorthak tactics, former tribute worlds that understood enemy weaknesses and humans who had shown everyone that courage could overcome impossible odds. Commander Park So-min, now captain of her own cruiser called Indomitable Spirit, coordinated the attack plan with alien officers who spoke dozens of different languages but shared the same goal. The liberation of the galaxy from terrorist rule had become more than a military campaign. It had become a revolution of hope against despair. The journey to Vorthak Prime took 2 weeks, during which the Liberation Fleet liberated dozens of worlds along the way. Each conquered planet welcomed their rescuers, with celebrations that could be seen from orbit. Former slaves joined the fleet as volunteers. Liberated colonies contributed ships and supplies. The revolution grew stronger with every victory. On Vorthak Prime itself, Overlord Thresh paced in his throne room, watching reports of defeats pile up on his desk. His empire was collapsing not just from military losses, but from the loss of fear that had held it together for centuries. Species across the galaxy were learning that the mighty Vorthak could be beaten, that their weapons could be destroyed, that their threats were empty when faced with united resistance. General Vex entered the throne room with the latest intelligence reports. "Overlord," he said, "the Liberation Fleet approaches our homeworld. They have over 10,000 ships representing every major species in the galaxy. Our remaining forces number less than 3,000 vessels, many of them damaged from previous battles." Thresh turned his yellow reptilian eyes toward his general. "How did this happen?" he demanded. "We conquered 1,000 worlds. We broke empires that ruled for millions of years. How did one primitive species destroy everything we built?" The answer came from an unexpected source. A communication signal penetrated the Vorthak defense network and filled the throne room with the voice of Admiral Li Dongwu. The human commander appeared on the main screen, his face calm but determined. As he addressed the Vorthak leader directly, Overlord Thresh, he said, "This is Admiral Li Dongwu of the Galactic Liberation Fleet. You asked how one species could destroy your empire. The answer is simple. We reminded the galaxy of something you made them forget. We showed them that bullies are only powerful when people are afraid to fight back." The Liberation Fleet took position around Vorthak Prime, and the final battle began. But it was not the overwhelming assault that Thresh had expected. Instead, the combined alien forces used tactics learned from human resistance, coordinated strikes from multiple directions, simultaneous attacks on different targets, and the kind of creative thinking that had made humans so dangerous. Captain Ryu Min-ho led a squadron of mixed human and alien fighters through the Vorthak defense grid using asteroid fields and debris clouds for cover. Commander Kang Mi-suk coordinated communication between different species, ensuring that Altarian crystal ships could work with Mandorian warriors, despite completely different fighting styles. The battle for Vorthak Prime lasted 3 days, but the outcome was never in doubt. The defense stations fell one by one under coordinated assault. The Vorthak fleet fought bravely, but was outnumbered and outmaneuvered by enemies who had learned to work together. The planet itself surrendered when liberation forces landed and were welcomed by Vorthak civilians who were tired of living under a government that ruled through fear. Overlord Thresh made one final attempt to understand his defeat. He sent a personal message to Admiral Li Dongwu as Vorthak forces laid down their weapons. "You could have negotiated," he said. "You could have lived as our subjects, paying tribute but keeping your lives. Instead, you chose this path of destruction. Why did your species risk everything for principles that other civilizations abandoned long ago?" Admiral Li Dongwu's response became the most quoted statement in galactic history and was carved into monuments on 100 worlds. "You are right, Overlord," he said. "We could have negotiated. We could have lived as slaves paying tribute to terrorists. But humans learned something from our own history that the galaxy had forgotten. Freedom is not something you negotiate for. Freedom is something you fight for. And when one species stands up to bullies, others remember they can stand up too." The fall of Vorthak Prime ended the age of galactic terrorism, but it began something more important. The species of the galaxy had learned they could work together against common threats. They had discovered that courage was indeed contagious, and that united resistance could overcome any oppression. In the aftermath of victory, the Galactic Council established new laws based on what became known as the Human Doctrine. No negotiation with terrorist organizations, no tribute paid to raiders, mutual defense agreements against any force that threatened galactic freedom. These principles became the foundation of a new galactic civilization. Captain No Yeon-ah, now commanding the defense of liberated Vorthak Prime, sent a message that summarized the human contribution to galactic society. "We did not just refuse to bargain with terrorists," she said. "We reminded the galaxy that some things are worth fighting for. We showed civilized species that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important than fear." Years later, when young aliens asked their teachers how the galaxy had become free from terrorist rule, the story always began the same way. Once there was a species called humans who looked at impossible odds and said, "We do not negotiate with terrorists." That simple phrase, spoken by people willing to die for their principles, had changed the galaxy forever. The humans had brought more than new technology or military tactics to galactic civilization. They had brought something the galaxy had lost and desperately needed: the understanding that freedom requires eternal vigilance, that peace demands strength, and that sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to make them understand that threatening innocent people has consequences. The galaxy was free, and it would stay free because humans had taught everyone the most important lesson of all: some things are worth fighting for, no matter how impossible the fight might seem. The 12-hour deadline passed without a single human surrender message reaching the Vorthak fleet. Overlord Thresh stood on the bridge of his massive warship called the Deathbringer, watching the human worlds through his viewing screen. His yellow, reptile eyes glowed with anger that had been building for 3 days. No species had ever ignored his ultimatums for this long. He turned to his second-in-command, General Vex, whose scarred face showed the marks of 100 conquered worlds. "Begin," the demonstration he ordered with his voice like grinding metal. "Destroy their outer mining stations. Show these foolish humans what happens when someone refuses the might of the Vorthak Empire. Make them watch their people die until they beg us to accept their surrender." The first target was Mining Station Alpha 7, a small outpost built on an asteroid in the outer reaches of human space. The station was home to 30 miners and security guards, led by Commander Kim Sung-woo, a former military officer who had retired to civilian life 5 years earlier when he married his wife back on Earth. Kim Sung-woo watched the Vorthak attack ships approach on his scanner screens, knowing his small station had no real military weapons and no chance of survival against 3 enemy destroyers. He could have ordered evacuation ships to flee. He could have broadcast surrender messages to save his people's lives. Instead, he opened a communication channel to Earth Command Station Alpha 7. "Standing firm," he said in a calm voice that carried across human space. "Give them hell for us." Commander Kim out. What happened next shocked every military expert in the galaxy who was monitoring the battle. The small mining station did not just wait. To die, it fought back with a creativity and ferocity that no one expected. Kim Sung-woo and his people turned their mining equipment into weapons, using explosive charges meant for breaking rocks as makeshift missiles and industrial lasers as combat beams. When the first Vorthak destroyer moved close to the station expecting easy destruction, a massive mining charge designed to crack asteroids slammed into its hull. The explosion was so powerful, it cracked the alien ship's armor and sent it spinning, out of control. The second destroyer tried to attack from long range, but the humans had modified their ore processing lasers, creating beams hot enough to cut through enemy shields. For 6 hours, the tiny mining station held off 3 Vorthak warships. The humans used every tool they had. Cargo haulers became ramming weapons. Oxygen tanks became explosive devices. Even handheld mining equipment was turned into personal weapons. The galaxy watched through intercepted communications as 30 humans fought like demons against impossible odds. When Mining Station Alpha 7 finally fell, it had destroyed 1 Vorthak destroyer, completely damaged another so badly, it had to retreat and killed over 200 alien soldiers. The cost to take one small human outpost was higher than the Vorthak had paid to conquer entire star systems in the past. News of the battle spread instantly across human space and throughout the galaxy. Alien military analysts could not believe the reports. A mining station with civilian equipment had fought off professional warships. The Vorthak, who were supposed to be unstoppable, had suffered serious losses, taking a target that should have surrendered without firing a shot. But the mining station was only the beginning. The real shock came when the Vorthak fleet reached New Seoul, an agricultural world with 2 million human colonists. Captain Nam Hyo-jin commanded the defense platforms orbiting the planet, and she had spent the last 3 days turning a peaceful farming world into a fortress. The Vorthak arrived expecting to find terrified farmers begging for mercy. Instead, they found weapons platforms that fired mining lasers modified for combat, cargo ships that had been converted into fighters, and a population that had turned their entire world into one giant trap. The battle for New Seoul lasted 3 days and became the most studied military engagement in galactic history. The humans used tactics that no military academy had ever taught. Farming equipment became artillery. Civilian transports rammed enemy ships. Orbital elevators were turned into massive weapons that dropped containers full of explosives onto Vorthak landing forces. Lieutenant Park Ji-won piloted a modified grain hauler against Vorthak fighter craft. Her ship was slow and clumsy compared to alien military vessels, but she used the planet's gravity and atmosphere to outmaneuver enemies who expected traditional space combat. When her weapons ran out, she rammed her cargo ship into a Vorthak cruiser while broadcasting a message that became famous across the galaxy. "This is what happens when you corner a human," she said as her ship struck the enemy vessel. "We do not just fight back. We fight dirty, and we fight smart. Take that information back to your overlord if any of you survive." The humans of New Seoul invented new ways to fight every day. They booby-trapped buildings, so that when Vorthak soldiers entered, they faced explosions and falling debris. They used agricultural chemicals to create poisonous gas that affected alien breathing. They turned irrigation systems into traps that could flood enemy positions. Commander Kim Bo-ra led civilian volunteers who had never held weapons before but learned to fight with farming tools and homemade explosives. Her people set up ambushes in crop fields and used knowledge of their own land to strike at enemies and disappear before retaliation could come. The Vorthak eventually conquered New Seoul, but the cost was enormous. They lost more ships taking one agricultural world than they had lost conquering the previous 10 civilizations combined. Over 5,000 Vorthak soldiers died fighting farmers and merchants who refused to surrender. Reports flooded back to Vorthak High Command from shocked field commanders. The humans were not fighting like any enemy they had faced before. Every building was a potential weapon. Every civilian was a possible soldier. Every piece of equipment could become a trap or explosive device. General Vex sent increasingly desperate messages to Overlord Thresh. "These humans do not follow normal rules of war," he reported. "They sacrifice everything to inflict damage on us. They seem to prefer death to capture our soldiers are becoming afraid to enter human buildings or approach human positions." The word spread through Vorthak ranks like a disease. Human space was different from other conquests. Instead of quick victories and easy loot, every battle was costly, and dangerous Vorthak soldiers who had terrorized the galaxy for generations began to fear fighting an enemy that would rather die than submit. Back on the Vorthak homeworld, military leaders studied the battle reports with growing concern. The conquest, that was supposed to take days, was stretching into weeks. Every human world required a siege. Every space station became a fortress. The primitive species was making the mighty Vorthak Empire pay for every victory with blood and ships. But the most disturbing reports came from Vorthak intelligence officers monitoring galactic communications. Other species were watching the human resistance with growing interest. The Altarians were discussing the battles in their crystal cities. The Mandorians were analyzing human tactics in their warrior schools. Even peaceful species were talking about what it meant to fight. Instead of surrender, Captain Shin Bo-Ram, commanding a human patrol vessel, sent a message that was intercepted by alien listening posts across the galaxy. "We may be losing every battle," she said, "but we are teaching the galaxy something important. We are showing them that terrorists can bleed, that bullies can be hurt, that no empire is truly unstoppable when people refuse to be afraid." The galaxy was learning that humans had brought something new to civilized space, the willingness to fight for principles, even when fighting seemed hopeless. The Vorthak were discovering that their reputation for easy victories was cracking against an enemy that measured success not by survival, but by the price they made their enemies pay. The war was far from over, but already everything had changed.